Welcome to part 6 of the creating the solitaire game Osmosis. When I originally started this, thought I was going to do this in 3 videos. Now it's looking like it's going to be 7 and potentially 8 depending on how much I decide to show you. Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at 2 pieces of code. The piece of code that deals the cards off from the deck onto the stack, and we're going to look at half of the code that allows you to actually play the game. Looking at the deal part first, in New Game, we've added a little bit of code here. So we've added a binding to the table called double button 1, and that calls deal 3 cards. Well, deal 3. So you can put double button, or double, I guess, on any of the button clicks. So we could do double button 3, double button 2. Remember, button 2 is the middle button, button 3 is always the right button. And there are all kinds of actions one can actually bind to your GUI. So you can have things like if the user hits enter, if the user types a specific number. So those are things that might be worth doing a little investigating. I don't know that we're going to actually do a video on all those, well, certainly not on all the possible combinations of things that one can bind. But anyways, double button 1 means that there is a double left click. And in that case, we're going to call deal 3, noting that when in the process of doing a double left click, there's actually a single left click that's called first. So in self.click card, we might want to pay attention to that. Okay, going down to deal 3 then. So this is what happens when we're playing the game and somebody decides to double click over here on the deck. Now you may have noticed immediately that there's some new information over here. I decided to throw this information up on the window so that as we're going through the code, it'll be easier to keep track of all these different things. The deck list, the stack list, the kitty lists 1 through 4, the played list 1 through 4, something called card selected, and the position that we have clicked on. Okay, so when we click on the deck, nothing happens. But if I double click the deck, then 3 cards get played. And hopefully you noticed over here that 3 cards disappeared from the deck and 3 cards appeared onto the stack. And if I do that again, notice the bottom 3 cards from the deck are going to then go onto the top 3 cards of the stack. And if I right click, remember the cheats on the 8 of diamonds, it shows up the Jack of hearts and the 8 of hearts and the 8 of diamonds. The 8 of diamonds is the top card, and underneath that's the 8 of hearts and the Jack of hearts. So we've talked about the cheat before, but I want to look at the dealing and how the dealing gets the stuff from the deck to the stack. Okay, so when we deal 3, the first thing is, so this is called on a double click, and we check to see where the double click occurred. And if it was on the deck, then we have some things to do. If it wasn't on the deck, well, there's nothing else to do, so we are just going to get out of here. Okay, let me click New Game here for a second. Notice that, remember there's this message up here telling you how to start the game with a double click. As soon as a double click has occurred on the deck, so as soon as we click there, that message is deleted. So that's this code right here, self.table.delete deal message. Deletes that message off. Now, we are going to take cards from the deck and place them onto the stack. Oh, I probably should play a card. So I'm going to play a Jack of hearts. And as I'm clicking here, cards are going onto the stack. Now the deck is empty. I'm going to go through this again. Okay, now in this very last click, there's only 2 cards here to put over here. So I'm not actually going to deal 3 off, but I'm going to deal 2 off. So the question is, how do I know how many cards to choose, or how many cards are going onto the stack? Well, in most cases, it's going to be 3, but if there's not 3 cards left on the deck, and remember the deck's called self.pack.order, then we can only deal the number of cards that are left. So in this case, the length of self.pack.order is going to be 2. We're going to take the minimum of 2 and 3 because I only want 2 cards, not 3. And that's going to be the number of cards that are going to be removed from the deck. Now, there's 2 possibilities here. The number of cards that we're going to deal could be 0. How does that happen? Well, that happens when we've dealt all the cards off. And they're all onto the stack. The first time we do that, there was a message here. I missed it. There was a double click here to reset the deck message. You've seen it before. When we get through the deck fully, that's deleted. Now, when we get through the deck, or all the way through the deck, why do I keep doing that? Stop. Just watch the deck over here and know. There we go. Okay. So num pops is 0. This is this case right here where there's no cards left on the deck. They're all on a stack. So what we need to do in this case is put everything that's on a stack back into the deck. But there's 2 caveats to that. One is the stack is in the reverse order of the deck. We can take care of that by using some clever indexing. And putting a -1 here will reverse the stack. But then there's something else we have to be cautious about. And this kind of thing is the sort of thing that can cause a bug that will drive you nuts. We can't just set self.pack.order, which is the deck, equal to self.stack : -1. If you do that, remember these are lists. Just setting this equal like this doesn't actually create a new list over here. This just gives this another name for the same list. Remember, lists are mutable. So what we want to do is actually create a new deck that's this thing in reverse order. So to do that, we use the copy. We've talked about this before in previous videos, but I just want to reinforce that idea here, that you can't just set this list equal to that list. That doesn't create a new list. That would be bad form. Okay, now we want to get the top card. So we take the length of the stack and we then plug that in. Well, we subtract 1 off from that. That gives us the last index on the stack. That gives us the top card on the stack. And you might say, well, why do you want to do that? Well, just a second. So we've copied the stack over to the deck. We found the top card on the stack. In this case, now we want to set the stack equal to empty. We're double clicking here on the deck, which is going to bring the stack back over to here. But when we do that, there's 2 things we have to do, and this is always the case in this GUI. We have to keep track of our list, the internal list that store all of our cards. So that's what we're doing here. But then we also have to maintain the GUI. So on the GUI, we have to get rid of this card here, the 8 of diamonds, and we have to place the down card again. So the 8 of diamonds is top card on the stack. So we've just found the top card on the stack. That's this. Now we're going to clear the stack out. We're going to delete the top card off from the table. So remember, the top card is tagged by its card info. In this case, it would be D8. So we will just delete that image off, and we're going to place the down card back into the deck spot. So I'll double click here. 8 of diamonds was deleted. Down card is placed. That's those 2 lines of code. Notice that we're not drawing all however many cards there are on a deck underneath this. We're just placing the down card here on the table. And our stack's back to 0, and our deck gets back to where it needs to be. Now, if there are actually cards left on the stack to be played, on the deck to be played onto the stack, that's this case, then we need to take the top 3 cards off. Now, if there's already a card, if the length of the stack is greater than 0, which means we already have cards on the stack on the table, then we're going to have to delete this 10 of diamonds off from the table and then place the next card. So we take the top card again, just like we did before, and delete it. And then we want to take these 3 cards that are on the deck. So the Jack of Clubs, the King of Diamonds, and the 5 of Spades, and place them on a stack. We want to do it in reverse order. All right, it's going to be 5 of Spades, King of Diamonds, and Jack of Clubs. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do a for loop. And we're going to go through the range of num pops. Okay, so here's a neat little trick with a list. You can do something called a pop. A pop takes the top card off from a list. So this is going to take the last card off the list, and then we're going to append that to the stack list. And how many times we're going to do that? Well, we're going to do that to the number of cards that we're going to play, which we set up here as num pops. And that's why it was called num pops. At the time, it probably didn't make any sense to call it num pops, but if you know what a pop is, a pop, again, just takes the last thing off from a list. Now, we have deleted, in this case, the top card that was here, but now we need to place when we deal again. So when I deal this again, I'm going to want to place the top 3 cards, and I'm going to place the 6 of Spades onto here. So I need to put the 6 of Spades on here, but then that previous Jack of Clubs we already deleted. So to place that card, the first thing I have to do is, so we have to get the top card off from the stack. Top card on the stack is the length of the stack minus 1. Plug that into the stack. So this is the top card on the stack, and we're going to place that card onto the stack position. And then the last thing is, when we go through all the way through the deal, let's see if I can do this right this time. That down card disappears. So after we have popped all these cards off, if there's nothing left in the pack, we delete the down card. Now this command right here, we don't need to pay too much attention to. That command is just resetting these lists so that you can view them, and I don't know that we're going to go through that just now. Okay, so that is how things are dealt on the deck. Now we're going to go up and look at click card quickly. This is when you click anywhere in here, click card is called. So if you do just a single left click, this is the method that is responsible for us to actually be able to play a card. This is the method that creates the highlights around the card and sets card selected and position. So these 2 things down here are set in this procedure. We're going to go through the first part of click card, and I think that's all we're going to have time for. And the first part of click card is what sets when a card is selected. So when we do this red highlighting, that comes from click card. So when we do a red highlighting around here too, that also is from click card. And then the part where we actually play a card down here, we'll have to get to in the next video, I think. Alright, so the first thing we get when there is an event, when something's been clicked, we get where clicked. Remember that where clicked returns a position that's going to look like stack, deck, kitty row 1 through kitty row 4, position or played row 1 through played row 4. So self.position, that's what that's going to look like. The next thing we're going to do is check to see if a card has been previously selected. So on a click before, did we set the card selected? If we did, then we need to do something this time around. So if I click on this card, card selected is now set. The next time I click, what should happen? Well, that highlighting should be set back to black. So this piece of code does that. If there was previously a card selected, so the length of that card selected is greater than 0, then we configure that card selected to have an outline of black. Remember that for card selected, the second position in that list is a position on the table, and that position on the table, conveniently enough, is also a tag into those rectangles. So this is the tag for the rectangle that was highlighted previously, and we want to put it back to black. Okay, now the next bit is if the position is none or deck. Remember, we talked about this when we talked about dealing 3 cards. So every time you double click up here, there's a single click first. And when that single click occurs, we don't want anything to happen. So this is the single click from clicking on the deck, or if we've clicked outside the playing area altogether, we just return and do nothing. And then the last bit is, this is where we set card selected. So here's where we're actually setting card selected, is in these two positions. And you are selecting a card to be played if you are selecting a card that is either on the stack or in the kitty. Those are the only cards that can be selected to play. So here's our two possibilities. So we'll go through the stack case. If the position that you clicked on is on the stack, that means you are selecting a card, or trying to. We have to make sure that there are cards actually on the stack to be selected. So if I click on New Game, there's no cards on the stack. If I click here, nothing should happen, and nothing does happen. That's actually that check right there. Now, if there are actually cards on the stack, so if I click, double click, there's a card on the stack, that's where the highlighting occurs. And when I click there, the card selected becomes the heart, 6 of hearts on the stack. And so I set that card selected now. What is the card selected? It's the last thing. We've seen this trick many times now. It's the last thing on the stack. That's an ordered tuple. Remember, stack is full of ordered tuples. And the position, which we have from where clicked up above. Then we're going to configure that rectangle. Remember that the tag for those rectangles is their position. So we just plug in self.position and outline it red, and there we go. The only difference between clicking on the stack and clicking on the kitty is we have to know the row number. And we've seen this trick before. To get the row number, the row number is actually going to be the last character in self.position. So if this was kitty row 3, that 3 would be the last character. To get the last character, take the length of that string self.position.